Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you all here. So my name is Dr. Sam. Nice to see you all. And I'm so excited to have you all today to join Kim and I. Before we dive into things, I want to introduce Kim Clark. She is a DEI communications teacher and consultant, and the co-author of the book that is coming out, The Conscious Communicator, which you'll share more about at the end of today's session. And she is also currently enrolled in my online program, DEI Blueprint, where I teach step-by-step process for my framework of developing and implementing a DEI strategy. Kim is online. In a second, she will be taking over the rest of this presentation. Again, I am Dr. Sam, and I am the founder of DSRD Consulting. We focus on DEI strategy development and enhancing the mental health and wellness of DEI practitioners. So we have a two-pronged focus. And today we will be talking about using a lens of equity and intersectionality in communicating and marketing DEI strategy, process, development, implementation, and just DEI in general. So what you see on the screen is an overview of what we'll be talking through today. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about how we even came up with the idea to have this session. And I'll share the DEI practitioner's role in marketing and communications. And then I'll turn it over to Kim to share the marketing and communications role in the DEI strategy development process. And then we'll open it up for a Q&A. We'll go through some of the pre-submitted questions first. And then if you have questions and would love to unmute, you will be free to do so. So let's jump right in. So to give you all some context, in my online program, DEI Blueprint, I have a module 8, where I outline a high-level communications plan that DEI practitioners can use to partner with the Marcoms team as they're building out their DEI strategy. And I talk through how to approach those conversations and create a process for ensuring that the Marcoms team is using an equitable and intersectional lens. What that means, tying everything into the strategy process and making sure to communicate that effectively. Having gone through module 8 of DEI Blueprint, and with her expertise being in the Marcom space, Kim reached out and highlighted some areas that she could speak to from the Marcom's perspective. And she'll be offering some of that insight shortly. And I thought, that's a great idea. I'm not in that space. And why not level up some of the content and make sure that we're having a well-rounded perspective? So with that being said, I'm going to give you a little, like a high-level summary of what I talk about in DEI Blueprint. So for those of you who are DEI practitioners, and there are some DEI blueprinters in here, because this is the time that we normally have our touch base call. So some of them will have seen some of this content. And for those of you who are in the marketing and comms space, you'll get some insight into how DEI practitioners navigate the strategy development process. And then I'll turn it over to Kim. So first off, collaborating with the Marcoms and the graphics department, which I know in some companies, the graphics department may be separate. They may be a part of like marketing, but I do mention the graphics department because you kind of have to make the strategy look good. It has to resonate with people. It can't just be a theoretical thing floating off in the company's like cloud somewhere. It has to be like a tangible document that people can access and download. So that's why the graphics department is looped into all of this as well. But collaborating with those departments helps the DEI practitioner to socialize the DEI strategy in a way that aligns with the company's brand, the company's voice, and the overarching mission of the company. That's basically the role of the Marcoms department, is to make sure that everything that the company does or puts out, both internally and externally, aligns with the brand of the company. And in order to do that, the Marcoms team need to have an understanding of their role as it relates to DEI in the company and the implementation of the DEI strategy, and also the role of the DEI practitioners and the role of other individuals across the entire company, so in other departments. Having all that information is how they can help with delivery of the DEI strategy. So DEI practitioners should share a high-level overview of the strategy, the process they took to develop the strategy, and what the main goals are within the strategy. So these conversations should happen across multiple meetings. It's not just one meeting. It should not happen right at the end of developing a strategy. That should not be the first time you're meeting with the Marcoms team. It's that ideally, the way I navigate this process is in the beginning, you have a few meetings with the C-suite exec team. Typically, there is a head of marketing and communications, a part of the C-suite leadership team. So when you're having these conversations with the CEO and COO and CFO and the head of marketing and comms, they'll be aware of your plans for over the next 8 or so months. And so it won't be the first time that they're hearing about this DEI strategy. And as you develop the strategy, there are checkpoints that I implement throughout my framework for you to communicate updates, develop an implementation plan, and highlight people, point of contacts that will oversee the different goals and objectives in your implementation plan and all that stuff. So at this point, when you're having the conversations, specifically with Marcoms, this should be probably like meeting 4. And there might be multiple meetings to get clear on the messaging and how you're going to deliver the DEI strategy, both internally and externally. So having these meetings, sharing this information at a high level will help to develop a communications plan. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see my most recent post. I talk about a communications plan and how essential that is for rolling out the DEI strategy. So in short, essentially the goal is for DEI strategists to provide the content. Marketing and comms takes that content and ensures it aligns with the branding and voice of the company. And the goal is for DEI practitioners to give the Marcoms team something to work with. And that's the high level summary of the strategy. Now, this communication plan, the way I approach it is in partnership with the Marcoms team, because I believe that marketing and comms, they're used to outlining processes, plans for communicating and marketing content. So that's their realm of expertise, their zone of genius. The DEI practitioners, they can only tell you the important things that should be in that plan. So don't feel pressure to develop a plan within the DEI strategy using like marketing and communications as a focus. So on to this communications and marketing plan. During your team with the Marcoms team, it's important to talk through how you'll share DEI strategy. So thinking about like social media and the type of words that you will use, type of colors, the pictures, the voice, that granular of a level. The DEI practitioners don't come up with that. The Marcoms people do. What the DEI practitioners do is say, hey, one of our goals is to increase the level of, or increase the representation of women of color in leadership positions. That's one of our goals. These are the tasks that we're doing to accomplish this goal. We are launching a mentorship program or sponsorship program. Now, the Marcoms team will say, oh, great, I can talk about the sponsorship program. We could do like, have some of the women of color leadership take over our social media and blah, 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 blah. So that's how the partnership should go. And when the Marcoms team starts spitballing these ideas, then it's up to the DEI practitioner to say, okay, well, make sure that we're not tokenizing people or stereotyping people or pigeonholing people. Make sure we're using inclusive language, not gender, like that kind of stuff. So that's how the partnership should work, essentially. And so while meeting with the Marcom's team, you want to guide them and make sure the way they plan to market the DEI strategy doesn't seem performative. It's inclusive, it's culturally sensitive to what's occurring socially, and it delivers the key components of the strategy. Because remember, it's not the point of all of this is not to say, hey, look, our company is diverse and we care about DEI. It's to say we have this strategy and we're being intentional about being equitable in our processes. And this is how we're going to do that. So it's all about the focus and the intentionality behind it. There were a few questions that talked about not being performative. That's how, using the strategy to guide you instead of optics and messaging. And I know that's kind of, there's a balance to be had, because I know like Marcom's like, that's what you do. But making sure the focus is the strategy and showing the intentionality of committing to accomplishing the goals in the strategy, that is what makes the marketing intentional instead of performative. If you just say, hey, we have a strategy, that's kind of surface level, it doesn't really mean anything because people come up with strategies every day. We don't know who spearheaded it. We don't know what's in it. We don't know if employees participated, if there was feedback, that kind of thing. So those are the things you focus on to be more intentional. And other things within the communication plan, I touch on guidelines for communication. So like language, dates and follow-ups and check-ins. So a process to run language and graphics by the DEI practitioner to make sure it aligns with the strategy and the language is inclusive. And those are just some high-level stuff. It doesn't need to be this big complicated thing that has all this level of detail. It literally can be like a schedule where you highlight key dates. You know that you want to start pushing marketing for the strategy by this date. So you need to have these materials prepped and ran by the DEI practitioner by this date. Who is going to ensure that that happens? You highlight that person and make sure that they check in with the person overseeing the communications plan to confirm that they've ran everything by the DEI practitioner. That is what I mean by a communications plan. It doesn't need to be obsessively detailed. And with that, I will turn it over to Kim to talk through some key areas from the lens of the marketing and communication specialist. And Kim will share her screen and share her insights.
Hey, everybody. All right. It's really nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. And I was just smiling so big, Dr. Sam, because everything that you're saying is just like, yes, yes, yes. And there needs to be more of a burden of responsibility on communicators to do our own work, so we don't always have to gut check on the DEI practitioner. We need to be pulling our own weight as communicators. We need to be building our own skills, because relying on like a single point of focus to say, can you review this? Can you review this? Can you review this? There needs to be over time some practice, skill building, some trust built. Communicators have areas of their business that can continue to represent the DEI strategy. There's definitely intersections, but there's like storytelling. There's a lot of communications that go out around the company that we put out, on social about products or services or something. We can't gut check and go back to our DEI practitioner partners every single time. We've got to learn how to fish for ourselves. And so when there's major things, of course, there's touch points. We need to have those reviews. But here's a worst case scenario. One client that I worked with, literally when they were putting together their diversity report, the head of PR came to me, who I was setting up a DEI communications role within the company. And I was in charge of participating in the storytelling aspect of the diversity report. And it was the first time they were really doing storytelling along with the diversity report. But the head of PR came to me and said, here are the key, I hear that you're going out and interviewing some employees. Here are the key messages that I want them to say. And here's some of the quotes I want them to say. So to me, that's worst case scenario. because that is as performative as it gets. That's from saying, this is the image that we want to project on the outside. This is what we want employees to say. It doesn't seem to take into consideration if it was an authentic experience for the employees. You see where I'm going with this? So DEI, the work, the role of communications needs to be like, this is what's going on the inside. This is what we haven't worked on. This is what we have worked on. And these are the proof points of what we've already accomplished from the inside out, rather than let's just make sure we hit all these key points. All right, let's get into some nitty-gritty here around the role and responsibility of DEI from the communicator standpoint, the DEI work as a communicator. So first and foremost, pretty much everything that Dr. Sam said, partner with DEI practitioners from the beginning. This is something, Dr. Sam, that happens a lot to us communicators. We're brought in too late on everything. And then we're like scrambling and reactive. And if you're a communicator, go ahead and shout out in the chat. I know you're there and you've been through this. You want to be involved earlier. Am I right? You know, you want to be a part of the crafting of the message. You want to understand, what are we solving for? And then you've got these elements of the company's mission, vision, values. You've got the business goals. You have the DEI strategy and how the DEI strategy is solving for these business goals and living out loud what our company's mission is and our values are. And we, as the communicators, get to craft that story and do it in a way that is authentic, right? And we're the ones that own the channels. Our DEI practitioner partners, they don't own the channels, right? And we typically have the relationships with marketing or brand who's doing the graphics. And we want things consistent across, our organization, right? So partnering as early in the process as humanly possible. We need to understand, what are we solving for, so we can see our role in delivering on the strategy. We should also be responsible for putting together our own DEI communication strategy. So here's the business strategy, here's the DEI strategy. Now as comms, how do we deliver on those two things? What's our role in delivering those strategies? And what do we own, and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable to that? Obviously, we want to make sure that a messaging is on point, inclusive, to Dr. Sam's point, not performative. And so many of us have gone through a lot of growing pains. We thought we were saying the right thing, but what we're understanding, especially for internal communicators, is what we say as a company and what we do in a company, there can be a gap. Am I right? And so how do we solve for that and make sure that we are in integrity as a company with our messaging? And the comms plan, Dr. Sam went through all of that. We want to make sure that we are looking at the who, what, when, where, why. We do comms plans in our sleep. That's not something that DEI practitioners necessarily have to learn, but you do need to weigh in. Hey, we're thinking of this executive sponsor for this kind of message. Here's the content that we're thinking of this person saying. This is what we were thinking about as we worked with employee resource groups on the upcoming Hispanic Latin Heritage Month coming up mid-September to mid-October. That's coming up in real life. And so this is, we've worked with the employee resource group and we've worked with the executive sponsor. This is what we're thinking of putting together as a campaign to specifically solve your X, Y, and Z goals related to the DEI strategy. So this is another example of how we're not performative, is that we're tying our communications into the DEI strategy goals, right? Another thing that we do, we definitely want to have things within the rhythm of the business, the communication channels that already exist. How do we incorporate? That's our role, is that we go in and we make sure that the sales team, they're all hands or not all hands, we're trying to change that name, the town hall or the company meeting, over to product or whoever it may be, or the doctors, versus our nurses, segmented audience, embedding it across the organization within the communication channels where all people are already at. And then we own the digital workspaces, typically internally, like our intranet working with Dr. Sam and our DEI practitioners around, okay, this is when we're looking to launch within the company meeting what our strategy is about, the goals that we have set, and then here's what we're responsible for on a monthly update on our dashboard. And here's a newsletter that we do quarterly. I'm making all this up because every organization is different. And we're going to be reporting on the progress of this. And we're going to have this call to action so people can get involved in the work. And it's not just something that's being handled over there and theoretically. It's actually something that's very tangible for people to be involved with. So they know that they have a role in the work as well. So we are responsible, first and foremost, as communicators, to make sure that we're constantly talking about this work. Sometimes it's incorporated into the business story. Sometimes it's just the DEI strategy that's its own thing that we're talking about. And so we need to, sharpen those skills to realize when is the right time with that kind of message. The point is, it has to be consistent. I'm going to talk about consistency in just a second, but it can't be just like, here's the results from the DEI survey that we held, and then nobody says anything. You don't hear anything for 9 months. That is not acceptable. So you need to know going in before you even talk about it, what is that comms cadence where we're going to be addressing how we're doing on the goals, how people can get involved, and then incorporating DEI into our regular rhythm of the business communications as well. We have a responsibility as communicators to have a DEI lens on all of our communications work. And so that's to the point that Dr. Sam was saying around inclusive language, visual representation, and understanding when we don't have anything to say about this. So how do we handle this internally versus externally? When do we comment versus commit, and vice versa if a social justice crisis situation happens? And I'll share a little bit more of that in just a second, but we are responsible for learning that. And some of that is from our DEI practitioners, but we are responsible and accountable to learn those skills and have a DEI lens on all of our communications, even if it's just telling people, make sure that you update your information for the in Workday, or, whatever the HR tool is. So sometimes part of the DEI strategy goals is reviewing content around policies or procedures or the employee handbook or the brand guidelines or something like that. We should be involved in that because ultimately we're the ones that are role modeling the language, the shared language across the organization. And I implore every organization to have an inclusive communications guide. That is that shared agreement across the organization of this is how we're going to speak outside and inside, to each other, and fostering that room, that grace for mistakes. But it's learning. It's saying we are going to be learning this language, and I can answer more questions around inclusive language about what it is and what it isn't if we have time. But it's really, really important because then that guide becomes your standard from which you can use in all of the other kind of content that the DEI strategy may have on its radar to review. Then, any external content with visuals, making sure that we're centering impacted audiences. Oftentimes external and internal communications will center on the company or make the company the hero when it's actually not appropriate to do that. That leads to performative communications as well. So understanding what is the correct centering and what is appropriate tone, that's where an inclusive language guide or inclusive communications guide could come in and help with that as well. So DEI needs to be embedded in our communication processes, our editorial process, all of our storytelling, all of our channels, internal and external. We need to be accountable and place DEI goals into our performance management. That's going to help us with the accountability to counterbalance, our humanity, our unconscious bias that is going to come in. And so, because to be a DEI communicator, to be a conscious communicator, It's literally being consciously aware of the language. How can I be more inclusive? I'm looking at these visuals. How can it be more representative? And ensuring that we are not reinforcing negative or otherwise any stereotypes of any populations. Or we're leaving any kind of groups of people out of our visuals. That's not okay. And then, of course, provide ongoing training, make that investment, have that social agreement for that shared language. That's really, really important when the team comes together and says, on your own. So DEI is doing its thing. And then in comms is like, we have to understand our role and responsibility here. We have this sphere of influence that's pretty exponential. Sometimes in trainings and webinars that I do, I ask everybody who represents a company, how many employees do you have? So when you're sending in, or how many followers do you have? And we'll get up to like 1 million employees all over the world just in a small webinar. That's 1 million people that we are influencing how they feel at work, how they feel about the company they work for, and the people that they work with. So we have pretty significant responsibility here. So we owe it to them to do our personal work so it can show up in our professional work. So ongoing training and support is really, really key. And then absolutely proactively build that relationship and infrastructure ahead of any kind of crisis situation with DEI practitioners, employee resource groups, and diversity councils. So what happens, Dr. Sam, sometimes is that comms departments, internal comms will get the budget for Black History Month, and then we go out and buy freaking wristbands. So we're not nailing it, you know, when it comes to that kind of work. So we have to turn the page here and either give the budget to the employee resource groups, but ultimately they need to lead the content. Let me go a little deeper on an example there. So we've had questions around Heritage Months, awareness states, and social justice issues. And let me first start with like Heritage Month, for example. Pride Month, that's what I'm talking about, autism, acceptance, month, etc. Start here, communicators, with the 3 C's of cultural moments. And that includes celebrate, crisis, and consistency. So celebrate. We're really good at that. That's good news. It's fun, right? So Pride Month must be a bunch of, parades and parties, and we're going to wear rainbow colors, and it's all really fun. That's just one piece, my friends. We can't just stay. That's how we become performative, is if we only see it as parades and parties. Okay. So we need to understand the social and historical context of how we got to Pride in the first place. There's a reason why there is a month dedicated to visibility and awareness and education and outreach and community building for LGBTQ plus folks in the United States. It's at different times in other parts of the world. So the celebration is there. Thank you for the visibility. That's fantastic. But you also have to understand that in the United States this month or this year, it is the most amount of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation ever, ever, ever. So you need to understand that there's a genuine need here. So it's not just parties. I'm a gay woman. It's not all parties for me, and it's August and I'm still gay. It's not June, right? So being consistent about telling these stories and understanding the historical and social context with why there's a celebration in the first place, that's typically because there's been a crisis situation or an ongoing crisis situation that has caused the need for this visibility and education and awareness. And so we need to be consistent about it and, really recognizing the intersectional identities of folks and tell kind of a holistic story, making sure that we're not reinforcing any kind of negative stereotypes. So when it comes to Heritage Months and all those kinds of things, the communities that are being celebrated and are in crisis simultaneously, those are the folks that need to lead the content. We need to listen to them. We need to hand the mic to them. And we just do our best and our expertise around messaging and channels, but we are not going to edit them. We are not going to give them the key messages that they need to hit. No, it needs from the inside out. It's going to be far more authentic storytelling. And it gives us a way to, measure, of course, but also really deliver on the DEI strategy. So on social justice, that is a whole other layer and level of very, very important communications. And we saw 2 years ago, the summer of 2020, with all the black squares that went up from companies. As soon as I saw that come up, I knew it was a bunch of BS. I knew it was a bunch of performative stuff, and it made me really angry. And that was the point where I reached out to my now co-author, Janet Stovall. You can see her on the cover of this book here, and said, will you write this book with me? She comes from the external communications and the executive communication side. I come from the internal communication side, and together we developed a framework called the depth model, because we were seeing so much messaging that was very surfacey, very fluffy, and we wanted to help train communicators and leaders to have depth, literally depth in their communications, specifically when it comes to social justice messaging. So it's a framework that's objective, it's scalable, it's replicable. It needs to be built into your comms strategy, built into your overall DEI strategy. Frankly, it's handy for crisis situations, but it answers the who, what, when, where, why do we speak on X issue versus another issue, coming from a place of strength, uniquely from our individual cultures and companies. So what popped out to you from the conversation? The more conscious communicators in the world, the better the world. So go to communicatelikeyougiveadamnpodcast.com and set up a one-on-one strategy session. And until next time, let's keep taking care of each other.